Brad here, and welcome to the Gods of Odds. Clearly, Brad Hoiseth had some divine intervention last week as he went 4 for 1 in his picks. Now, to two of my favorites, Brad Hoiseth and Dave Dabbah.
Coming up on the Gods of Odds, we are going to give you our top 10 Week 3 National Football League games worth spending some money on. I'm Dave Dabbah. That is Brad Hoiseth right there. We are both so unbelievably fired up to talk to you about Week 3 of your National Football League season. I can't wait to also cover a little bit of what happened last week with Justin Herbert and of course Gardner, that looks like a legitimate quarterback in the National Football League, and all the great quarterbacks that are putting up ungodly QBR ratings. We've got all of that, and trust me, a whole lot more coming up on episode number 2 of the Gods of Odds. Brad, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dave. Hey, we had a big week last week, didn't we, huh? I mean, I went 4-1 in my picks, and you went 4-1 in your picks. And, you know, if you do that every week, chances are your bookie will quickly lose your phone number. So, we had a good week, just having a lot of fun. And hopefully we can do the same thing again this week.
Fantastic. Now, our show was so successful last week, Brad, that we actually got a sponsor for this week's show. And so we thought we would just go ahead and lead off the show and just give them a quick shout out. Brad, do you want to tell everybody out there who is the first ever sponsor of the Gods of Odds on the Mighty
Say hello
Podcast?
To the Heatr app. The Heatr app was in contact with us last week, and so we're learning more about the Heatr app or Heatr Sports, or I don't know. You're the marketing guy, so I'll leave that up to you. But nonetheless, that was interesting to see somebody coming out of the woodwork, be a part of the Gods of Odds. It tells us we're doing all right, huh?
Yeah, no, I know. Now, real quick plug for the guys over the Heatr app, which is Heatr Sports, if you want to check them out on Twitter. So Brad picked, between Brad and myself, we both picked 10 games last week. What we could have done with the Heatr app is we could have plugged those games in against the odds that we got and monitored the games throughout the weekend. So it's a really cool app that does some really cool things. If you have a chance, do check it out. All right, Brad, I wanted to start this week off by saying, first of all, congratulations. I always say that you're the smarter god than me when it comes to picks inside the National Football League, especially with your own picks. For me to go 4-1 just shows that the Hoiseth is officially rubbed off on me.
Yeah, so is the dog, apparently.
I heard
dog in the background, and he's
dog in the background. Assuming that doesn't keep up, we'll just keep going at this point. So the question is, what did you think about the quarterback performance sort of across the National Football League last week? Because just some insane numbers. I was looking at these QBR numbers, and it's like there's like almost, I think there's like 19 or 18 quarterbacks with a QBR over 90 in the National Football League this year. I've never seen anything like that before.
Well, it just goes to show you, I think, that the offenses right now are ahead of the defenses. No preseason, no real live fire, and it seems as if the offenses have adjusted to the 2020 season a little bit quicker than the defenses have, which is kind of contrary to what you usually see. Usually you see some really sloppy play in the opening weeks with a lot of penalties and stuff of that nature, but they were clicking on all cylinders. I think it also speaks volumes about how college football has prepared quarterbacks and how the game of the NFL has changed to look a little more similar to the college style of football. So, the quarterbacks, the young guys are Kyler Murray, I think, is clearly on the verge of of becoming a superstar. And then we got to see Justin Herbert, and I know you're happy about that. Herbert, I thought, looked okay, made a couple rookie mistakes in a game the Chargers really probably should have won against the Chiefs. They let that one kind of slip away. But how about that injury to Tyrod Taylor pregame? I know that was one that kind of got your interest.
Oh, yeah, dude. I'm sitting there. I've got the game on, and Justin Herbert comes out, and I'm like, finally, because we know who Tyrod Taylor is, right? Like, we know who he is as a quarterback. Let me at least get a glimpse of some of these young quarterbacks and see how they're going to do. I mean, Joe Burrow threw the ball 61 times on Thursday Night Football last week. 61 times did Joe Burrow drop back to pass. So get some of these young quarterbacks into the game is really what I'm all about at this point. So watching Justin Herbert, I was very impressed. What impressed me more than anything was how he actually kept his eyes down the field. He's a tall guy with a big arm, and he's sort of like Tom Brady, where he's able to see multiple routes being run at the same time. It's sort of something that like shorter quarterbacks can't do just because of their height. Justin Herbert looked, in my opinion, really fantastic. But I think what shocked me most about the quarterback play in the National Football League, and no, I'm not going to talk about my Minnesota Vikings and Kirk Cousins, because at one point during that horrific performance last week, he actually had a 0.0 rating. And we were like in the third quarter of that football game. That is how bad Kirk Cousins played. But Gardner Minshew, who plays tonight on Thursday Night Football, has just put this Jacksonville Jaguar team on his back and is preventing the Jaguars with his play on the field from getting into the Trevor Lawrence bid for a first-round draft pick. How do you feel about Gardner so far?
You know, I got a chance to watch Gardner Minshew play at the junior college level, so I was kind of familiar with him coming into the league. I wasn't quite sure how he'd fit in. I think he went to a place where he could play, obviously. And, he's an exciting young guy to watch. I mean, he's got a lot of charisma, and there's something about him. He's kind of got that it that they talk about when it comes to winning games. And he's just a young kid out there having a lot of fun. I think it just goes to show you, if you're relaxed and out there having a lot of fun, you're probably going to play better football. Yeah.
I mean, he's 6 touchdown passes, 2 picks so far. And this is what I'm saying, Brad. A QBR of 115 for Gardner Minshew. I mean, either they've changed how they do these algorithms to figure out the QBR, or the defenses in the National Football League have absolutely fallen apart and lacked the ability to actually really get ready in preseason, and have sort of lacked the ability to add enough talent with their draft picks.
Yeah, well, 2 quarterbacks, however, who we don't have to worry about their QB rating being that high, however, is one you mentioned, Kirk Cousins, and another guy, which I have repeatedly said is, I think, the most overrated quarterback in the league, Carson Wentz. And right now, there's a total of 32 starting quarterbacks, but the rankings go 34 deep because 34 different guys have started. And Kirk Cousins is ranked number 34 right now, and Carson Wentz is ranked number 33. So the people in Minnesota and Philadelphia are about ready, they've already seen their life flash before their eyes in terms of the 2020 season. And those are 2 teams that I would think, and 2 quarterbacks that are definitely going to be on the hot seat in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and the other guy who actually hasn't played so well so far at the start of this National Football League season is my all-time favorite journeyman quarterback. And that, of course, is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick, who is essentially the placeholder quarterback of the future for another National Football League team, I think is literally 1 or 2 bad starts away from watching Tua do what Tua is going to do to the rest of the National Football League. I cannot wait. I am officially on week number 3 of Tua Watch. All right, Mr. Hoiseth, I'm not even going to allow you to respond to my Tua statement. Let's get into it. We have 10 games for you that we believe are worth spending some money on, some of your hard-earned dollars. We know we're dealing with COVID. We know some of you are dealing with financial hardships. But if you're going to put a couple dollars down on something this weekend, these are your top 10 games worth throwing some money down on them. Mr. Hoiseth, let's get your 5th pick first.
Well, the 5th pick comes with kind of an attachment to it because I decided to surprise you this week, Dabbah. And I decided to create a super fan. And this week's super fan is, well, right there. You're going to see it behind me. The Gods of Odds super fan of the week. That right there, Dave, is my mom, Lily Vale. And she's our biggest fan, by the way. And she said she wanted me to pick the Vikings game. And obviously the people in Minnesota are kind of freaking out about the Vikings right now, and for good reason. They look pretty bad. But the Titans from Tennessee are visiting the Vikings, and Tennessee is a 2.5-point favorite. And, you know, Tennessee has beaten 2, I would say, subpar football teams by 2 and 3 points. And so as much as Tennessee comes in 2-0 and the Vikings are 0-2, I don't think all is well and fine in Tennessee with this football team. In fact, I don't think they're a very good rushing defense whatsoever after the loss of Jarrell Casey during the offseason. And the Vikings, their team is run by a bunch of old dinosaurs at coach. Whether it's Gary Kubiak or, the head coach Mike Zimmer, and some of these guys that are running the team this is what they do. They run the football. And so I think the Vikings are actually going to come out and play pretty well this week. It's nobody wants to start 0-3. I know they expanded the playoffs this year to, I think, 8 teams in each conference, but I don't think all is as good with Tennessee as it may appear with the 2-0 record. And I don't think the Vikings are all as bad as their own 2 record, although last week certainly had to be, one of the most brutal watches for a Viking fan of all time. I see you got your Adam Thielen jersey there behind you, and we got the super fan. And so on that note, as my number 5 pick of the week, I say the Vikings are going to get the running game going. I think this is really kind of a toss-up game. I'm going to take the 2.5 points. I'm going to take the Vikings.
Yeah, I agree with you. And first of all, welcome to our first ever super fan. That is absolutely fantastic. It's week number 2 of the Gods of Odds show. We've got a sponsor already, and we've got our first super fan. So excellent job. Look, I think the Vikes are a total disaster at this point. The holes that the team has, before I even get into the offense, are so massive on the defensive side. They just let too many people go in the secondary. Look, I'm not saying they should have kept Xavier Rhodes back there, but they probably should have kept Waynes. And there's probably a couple other defensive linemen that they should have kept for another year or 2 as they were heading into sort of a rebuild. Now you're sitting there with a defense that on a weekly basis is going to have to go out and sign new players. And that's the world that the Vikes live in. I do agree with you. I think Kirk Cousins is gonna finally wake up. He's gonna come out of hibernation. He's literally been hibernating. He's not as bad as he's been playing. Yes, their offensive coordinator Gary Kubiak is as old is, but he'll find a way to feed Dalvin Cook. The Vikes will get enough going in order for them to win this game, and I will also take the 2.5 points. Okay, so moving on to my 5th pick, and unlike Brad, I do not have a picture of a super fan to throw up behind me, but I do have the Cowboys versus the Seahawks. This game is in Seattle. Seattle is a 5.5 point favorite heading into this game. So you have to ask yourself, do you believe in the second half of the game against the Atlanta Falcons that the Dallas Cowboys played? Do you believe that's the football team that's going to show up here in Seattle? And for me personally, I think that the Cowboys have sort of righted the ship, if you will, at the start of the season. I see big things for the Cowboys in the future. They are absolutely going to figure out how to run all over this Seattle Seahawks defense, which statistically speaking, is one of the worst defenses in the National Football League right now. We talk about the Vikings having a lot of holes. At least in Seattle, they've got Jamal Adams on that team, but that defensive line cannot get any pressure on anybody in Seattle. I would expect the Cowboys to run all over them in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's a 5.5 point line there. The Cowboys are underdogs. And I think I said it last week on the show. This Seattle defense is not very good. People think of Seattle, they think of the great defenses they had over the last decade. And this is just not one of those defenses. This is going to be a high-scoring game. It could be one of those games where the team with the ball last wins. I believe the Cowboys have a great boost of energy after that big comeback win last week. And, I think they don't really have a presence at tight end, the Cowboys. I think that might help them out. During the first half of this year, people that used to defend the Cowboys and got used to seeing guys like Jason Witten and stuff like that. And I think it gets more balls to guys like CeeDee Lamb and things of that nature. And I just think that they have to be coming off a real high, winning that game against Atlanta against, really improbable odds. And I just think 5.5 is a lot of points for a Seattle team that doesn't play a lot of defense. I'm going to go with you there. I'm going to take the Cowboys in the 5.5.
I think one of the biggest surprises from last week happened at the airport for me. And that was the fact that Arthur Blank and the Atlanta executives of the Atlanta Falcons allowed Dan Quinn to get back on the plane from Dallas, flying back to Atlanta. Before we move on to our next pick, Brad, how do you feel about Dan Quinn?
Man,
I hate to throw you a curveball here, but how do you feel about Dan Quinn?
Yeah, the problem with Dan Quinn is it's always been all about the offense and nothing about the defense. They never play any defense in that stadium or in any other stadium for that matter when it's the Falcons. And I've seen enough Dan Quinn in Atlanta to know that's not a guy that's going to win a Super Bowl there. He might find his calling somewhere else, but that was a tragic loss. You just can't allow that to happen, and you got to wonder if Arthur Blank is starting to think about somebody else down the road.
Yeah, I think I'm just fundamentally, like the head coach in Denver who totally mismanages the clock on a game-by-game basis. And it just so happens that his mismanagement actually took place on Monday Night Football, the first Monday Night Football game of the year. So the whole nation had a chance to see it. The thing, it's like I heard all this stuff on some other shows on Monday about, how could the players not know that on an onside kick, the team receiving the ball can move up and get the ball once it's kicked? How could they not know? How could they not been taught that? And I said, look, of course they've been taught that. Of course they've been taught that. The problem is that nobody on the Atlanta Falcon coaching staff, including Dan Quinn, thought it was a good idea to remind them about it before the play actually happened. I mean, it is just unbelievably ridiculous what happened in that game. Of course, I'm excited because I've got the Cowboys winning it all this year. So that was a good thing for that particular pick. Anyways, let's move on to your fourth pick.
Yeah, my number 4 game of the week is the Chiefs visiting the Ravens on Monday Night Football. One thing we found out last week is, remember in week 1, the home teams only went 8-8. Well, last week there was this huge bounce back with the home teams. They went 11-5, and I think the Chiefs showed some vulnerabilities last week. They won a game that, honestly, I think if you watched the game from beginning to end, you probably would agree that, if Justin Herbert doesn't throw the interception when they're driving on early fourth quarter, that game probably goes the way of the Chargers. And we saw that a good defense like the Chargers can make adjustments on somebody like the Chiefs. And I'm not as big of a believer in Clyde Edwards-Helaire as, perhaps a lot of people that pick their fantasy football teams this year. I don't think he's as good a running back as Damian Williams. He may end up being a really solid piece of that offense somewhere down the road, but I think he's better in open space where he's got places to run. But I think if you close off the running lanes, he's really doesn't have that great of ability to run through the tackles. And I think the Ravens have one of the elite defenses in the league. And I think they want to prove that they were the better team last year when they had things rolling and then kind of choked in the playoffs. They're playing at home. It's a big game. I know home games don't mean much this year with no crowd, but at 3.5, I believe the Ravens will cover that line. I think they'll beat the Chiefs and get off to a big start there in Baltimore.
Yeah, I agree with you on this one. For me, Lamar Jackson is, really single-handedly the best player in the National Football League and could win the Most Valuable Player of the Year award. Very few holes on this Ravens team. It's one of the things I like most about the Baltimore Ravens this year, sort of across the board. Look, what happened to Kansas City against the Chargers the other day was sort of an enigma. It's the thing we sort of expect to happen in a game between division rivals in the AFC West. So I see the Chiefs at least playing significantly better this week, and we'll do a far better job in this game than they did against the Chargers. But the firepower that this Baltimore Ravens team has is absolutely tremendous. Look, last week I thought, okay, Harbaugh's going to stick with his plan of not allowing Lamar Jackson to rush. Like, that was the plan at the start of the year, Brad. We're going to slow Lamar Jackson down. We're going to make him stay in the pocket a little bit more because of what happened with Tennessee in the playoff game. And that did not happen last week. And I expect that this week it is just going to be an all-out blitz of Lamar Jackson in this particular game.
God here. Sorry for the interruption, but I had to jump in and say that I think Hoiseth and Dabbah are crazy. Russell Wilson has a QBR of 140 and he's already thrown 9 touchdowns. Plus, I'm supposed to tell you to go download that new Heatr app in the App Store.
Okay, so as you can see, we put up a big banner there for you to see of the big Heatr app, which we talked about a little bit earlier in the show. Make sure you go ahead and download it and try it out. Moving on to my, let's see here, Brad, my 4th pick of the week has to be the Packers at the Saints on Sunday Night Football. And I have to say, I cannot wait for this game. Now, the Saints are favored in this game, and I'm looking at this game as an easy one to pick. This to me was one of the easiest games of the week to pick, and that's because I believe in Aaron Rodgers. There, I said it. I believe in Aaron Rodgers' ability to figure out how to outgun Drew Brees at Drew Brees' a deep old age of 41 years old. Drew Brees looked old 2 years ago. It's like, people have been talking all week about how Drew Brees doesn't throw a good deep ball anymore. I'm like, it's not that he doesn't throw a good deep. Drew Brees still throws a good deep ball. His problem is with intermediate passes. And this particular Saints team is not nearly as good on defense as everybody thinks it is. Look, I'm going to say right now that I'm not like a Packer lover, as you know, with the Minnesota Viking paraphernalia behind me. But this Matt LaFleur as a head coach, with Mike Payton being his defensive coordinator, there is no way they are going to lose on Sunday Night Football in New Orleans. Hands down, for me, the easiest pick of the week to throw some money at.
Well, I don't know. I'm going to have to disagree. We've agreed so far. We've had great symmetry, symbiotic nature of our relationship there, but it's not that easy to win on the road in the NFL. This is one of the highlight games of the week, I think. Along with the Chiefs and Ravens on Monday Night Football, I think this Saints-Packers game is a good one. Two teams that would appear both headed for the playoffs, probably play again somewhere down the road. A lot of it's going to, Michael Thomas is not playing, and I don't think that helps New Orleans at all. But the Packers have opened up with the Vikings and the Lions in week 1 and 2. And as most fans are, it's overreaction Monday. They get all excited about something or they get all depressed. I still think the Packers have got some issues, and I think those could be exploited this week. I think the Saints are a better football team. The line's 3.5. I think it's a pretty good line. I'm glad it's your game and not mine. But I'm actually going to take the Saints and give the 3.5. I think they're embarrassed after what happened last week in Vegas. And I think Drew Brees bounces back at home in week 3 against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers.
I would totally agree with you if this game was a little bit later in the season. But I can think of, 4 or 5 times in Sean Payton's career where his teams have started out, 0-4 on the year, 1-3, like this, and then he figures things out, and then the Saints become a far better team. Sean Payton just needs a little time. He needs a little time playing with his players, if you will, and sort of figuring out how to mesh it all together. The Saints are going to be fine. They will be in the playoffs this year, but we absolutely disagree on this game. That's for sure. Brad, take me to your third game of the week, please.
Well, first of all, I would like to recap that a little bit here. The Green Bay Packers are going to see a real defense this week. They haven't seen that for 2 weeks yet, and so I think they're a little bit untested offensively in terms of what they're going to do this year. I know it looks good for Aaron Rodgers through 2 games against the Vikings and Lions, but I do believe the Saints have a legitimate defense. Now, on to that third game. I picked probably one of the dog game of the week, but the line was just way too enticing, and I know we're going to disagree on this, but it is the New York Football Jets at the Indianapolis Colts, and the line is the Colts are favored by 11. And look, that's a big line. If you're giving up 11 points, you better be the Kansas City Chiefs, or you better be the Baltimore Ravens, or when they were playing well, the San Francisco 49ers, something along the Colts are not that kind of team. And not that the Jets are any good, obviously. I mean, that's a bad football team, but these two teams do know each other pretty well. And I just think that's way, way too many points to be giving up at home. I wouldn't, I would expect that Indianapolis will win the game. But, Indianapolis' offense is nothing special. I don't think they're going to put up big points. I see it being more of a defensive struggle where Indianapolis wins the game by 7 to 10 points. But 11, I just thought, was a very, very big number. And so for my number 3 game of the week, I'm going to take the Jets plus 11.
Yeah. So I mean, of course, it is crazy for me to pick the Colts in this game. I agree. Like, fundamentally, like if you were going to a sports bettors symposium, like they would tell you to stay away from anything that's 7 points or higher. Like just don't touch it. Just walk away. There's other things to bet on. I mean, this is one of your top 5 games, so I will give you my opinion on it, which is I think so little of Adam Gase at this point with the unraveling that's actually happened with the New York Jets. I feel bad for Joe Douglas, the GM of this team, because he's going to have to make a move. And I went and I checked earlier in the week, and their bye week doesn't happen until like week 11, Brad. Like they have to, they might literally have to make a coaching change before they even get to their bye week. That's how bad things have gotten inside the locker room of that New York Jets team. And then they have been hit with a rash of injuries. I don't even know. Like, I think that the New York Jets right now, as we're taping this Gods of Odds podcast, are actually holding open tryouts for wide receivers. Like, they are so decimated by injuries, it's ridiculous. So I think if ever there was a time to throw some dollars at an 11-point spread, this would be the week to do it. That's why I am going with the Colts in this one. Real quick, by the way, at the end of the last game we covered, Brad said, the Packers are haven't faced a real defense, and now they're gonna face the Saints defense. I would say that the real issue here is that if the Packers want to watch, what a real defense looks like, they probably shouldn't be watching tape of the Saints. They should probably be just watching tape of the Ravens. I'm just saying, because that's what a real defense looks like, Hoiseth. All right. So moving on to my third pick of the week. And I've got this one, and this is my gift to Brad Hoiseth. I try to give, I give and I give and I give. And I try to give to Hoiseth at least once a week. And this year, so far, it's been Eagle gift after Eagle gift after Eagle gift. And so I've got the Bengals playing at the Eagles, a 4.5-point favorite for the Eagles. I am not in any way going to take, I'm going to take the points, and I'm going to go with the Bengals. I believe in Joe Burrow. I'm not sure they're going to win the game, but I think they will absolutely cover this particular spread. Look, 61 passes last week. Burrow looked way better than I thought he was going to look. He's got no offensive line, but Brad, what Joe Burrow has that a lot of other people don't have in the National Football League who are starting quarterbacks? Do you know what it is?
0 wins. How's that for a guess?
outside of zero, that's an organizational issue. Outside of zero wins, Joe Burrow has heart, and he's got a ton of heart. And I'm telling you, he literally will not let this Bengals team lose too many more games before they get their first victory. And what better way for him to get his first victory of his career against Carson Wentz and your Philadelphia Eagles?
Well, I mean, these are, how I feel about both these teams right now. The Bengals, to me, are nothing to get excited about, Joe Burrow or not. They just don't, their defense is horrendous. And the Philadelphia Eagles have gotten off to a rugged start with Carson Wentz, and you know how critical I've been of him. I just happen to think that Philadelphia's got a better coaching staff. And, I get a sense. Here's why I'm taking the Eagles in this game, Dabbah. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
I play in a fantasy football league with a guy who once finished second in the world in fantasy football at the World Championship. This is a true story.
Where does that even happen? Who holds the rankings for that?
They used to have the World Championships of Fantasy Football in Las Vegas. It's no longer there. I think the guy got busted for some sort of tax fraud. But not my buddy, but the guy that ran the league, that have like 170 teams draft on one night at the bottom of some big casino. And then ultimately they ended up playing for $500,000. Well, a friend of mine finished second one year, partnered with another guy. And so this guy's in my fantasy football league. And this year on his roster, I play him this week, and this is the only reason I took note of this. This week I play him, and his two quarterbacks are Carson Wentz and Patrick Mahomes. And take a guess at who he's playing this week.
Who's he playing this week?
He's playing Carson Wentz. And I'm telling you right now, when this guy makes a decision like that, it's time to take note. So I rule out any logic in this pick. I'm going straight on my buddy Bob, who says play Carson Wentz. I'm taking the Eagles, and I'm giving the points.
Buddy Bob, when Buddy Bob picks, like E.F. Hutton, the audience listens.
That's right. That's exactly right. All right, well, let's move on here. Let's get away from these crappy teams, and let's move on to two more crappy teams. The football team from Washington is visiting the Browns. And another line that just kind of stunned me was that the Cleveland Browns are a 7-point favorite. Let me say that again. The Cleveland Browns are a 7-point favorite. Now, I've watched a little bit of Washington the last couple of weeks. And, there wasn't a lot said about Washington at the beginning of the year. They did beat the Eagles to start the season. And then I thought they looked actually okay last week in Arizona. I don't think they're as bad a football team as I really thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year. And if you watched, the game last Thursday, everybody got all excited about the Cleveland Browns and their win over the hapless Cincinnati Bengals. But I'm not entirely convinced that Cleveland is a great football team. They ran the ball real well, and Baker Mayfield made a couple plays, but I just feel like that line at 7 is very large for a Cleveland Browns team that really hasn't proven themselves yet. So I'm going to take the 7 points, and I'm going to go with the Dogs in Cleveland, and the Dogs being the Washington. Plus, I also wanted to be the first guy in the Gods of Odds to take the football team. I love it. I have the football team. I'm taking the football team to beat the odds.
Yeah, no, a couple things. One, I absolutely don't want to spend too much more time talking about Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns at this point. They don't deserve it. It's like they literally, they don't deserve our time, Brad. They really don't. And I agree with you. Ron Rivera is such a solid coach. I know this isn't a very good Washington football team, but that's a lot of points, and it is the Cleveland Browns that we're talking about. And we saw last week, and I'm just going to leave you with this, was the best performance you could ever expect to get out of a Cleveland Browns team with Baker Mayfield as their starting quarterback against one of the worst defenses in the National Football League, against an offense that has no offensive line. And they still were sitting there watching an onside kick happen in the last 30 seconds of the game. So I'm definitely going with the Washington football team in this game as well. Speaking of a bad football team, and this right here, it just, like, if you were to ask, we had done a different podcast a while back, and I know Brad was just trying to get some national attention with his pick of the Lions to win the NFC North, which was, of course, a crazy pick, and still is today. But it's fun to remind Mr. Hoiseth of stuff he said in the past. That being said, I'm going to, with my second game of the week, I've got the Lions playing the Cardinals in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona. The Cardinals are giving up 6, so they're favored by 6 in this one. This was a extraordinarily easy pick for me to take. Look, I'm just going to say just a couple quick things about this. Kyler Murray looks fantastic. He looks confident. He looks like he understands how the National Football League works now. And, I saw glimpses of him last year, and he sort of figured certain things out here and there, but they seem to be working really well together. Plus, Cliff Kingsbury, the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, by far has the best house of any coach in the National Football League. He even puts Roger Goodell's basement to shame. So with those reasons and vastly improving Cardinals defense, I do not see Matt Stafford doing anything in the third quarter of this game.
Well, for us people that did make those gutsy, I'll call it, predictions at the beginning of the year, I'm still waiting to see what the Lions look like when they get the number one wide receiver back. And I think, they were close in Chicago, and, for moments last week against the Packers, they were in the game up till halftime. I still don't think it's a horrible football team. I think I overrated them at the beginning of the year, obviously. But without Kenny Golladay, this team is just, they've lost basically the number one weapon. And it's tough to win in the NFL without your number one weapon. And I'm with you on the Cardinals. I think this is a spectacular young team to watch. When Kyler Murray takes off running, I'm thinking about Michael Vick. I'm thinking about some of the great running quarterbacks that we've ever seen. I mean, this kid is so quick on his feet that once he gets in the open field, it is just forget about it. You're not going to tackle him in space, not with one guy. And so the Lions, on the other hand, can't stop anybody against the run. I think they got one of the worst run defenses in the league. I expect to see a lot of Kenyon Drake this week for Arizona. I wouldn't be surprised if Kyler Murray had a couple running touchdowns himself. I'm with you. As much as I would like to keep following the Detroit Lions with my early preseason prediction, without Kenny Golladay playing in Arizona, a team that's red hot, I think you got to take the Cardinals to give the points.
Yeah. I got a direct message on our Mighty Rip Twitter account earlier in the week, Brad, and it was from a Lions fan, and the Lions fan said, Dabbah, will you please start talking about the firing of head coach Matt Patricia, please? We know that you're all over a couple other head coaches. Please, when next time you do anything, will you bring it up? So I wanted to bring that up. Look, bad decision to bring him back as a head coach. Very few of the Bill Belichick disciples have actually worked as legitimate head coaches in the National Football League. And I think the trend with head coaches in the National Football League, and I think you would agree with me on this, is hire a young offensive-minded coordinator if you're going to hire somebody young to be your head coach. Don't bring in some of these defensive coordinators that have been sitting behind other great defensive coordinators, because you might not be really getting anything other than a placeholder head coach, which is exactly what Matt Patricia has turned into. He's actually made this football team worse in the last 24 months than they were before.
Yeah, the funny thing about that is that, I keep waiting for one of these New England Patriot assistant coaches to become a good coach in the NFL. It's not like, Bill Walsh. Remember, everybody that was used to talk about the Bill Walsh, coaching tree, and they had all these guys that were disciples of him and eventually became great coaches. These guys from New England don't seem to have a lot of success once they get their own gig, and I haven't quite figured it out yet. Anyways, I'm going to move on to my number one game. A team that I was impressed with last week, although they lost, the Chargers are at home against the Panthers. The Los Angeles Chargers are a 6.5-point dog. I almost screwed up and called them the San Diego Chargers. I still have never gotten used to that, and to me it's still really wrong that they are LA Chargers. I don't quite get that, but the Chargers are 6.5-point favorite at home against the Panther team that now has no Christian McCaffrey. I'm not sure Carolina was good offensively with Christian McCaffrey, but I believe the Chargers have a very, very good defense, and they nearly pulled off that victory against the Chiefs last week in a game where, the defense looked very impressive for three quarters of that game. And that defense was also very good in Week 1 against the Bengals on the road. And contrary to my last game where I couldn't believe the 7 points that Cleveland was giving up, I look at those two games side by side. I see Cleveland as a 7-point favorite. I'm going, what? And I'm looking at the Chargers, who are only 6.5-point favorite, playing against a Panther team that's not very good. And so, to me, that was my number one pick of the week. I am going to take the Chargers. I'm going to give the 6.5 because I think LA is actually a pretty good football team. And even though that game hurt last week, I think they found something kind of special maybe in the future in Justin Herbert. Thank goodness for the doctors ahead of time that were working on Tyrod Taylor. They moved that starting date up a little bit for Justin Herbert. I know you got something to say about that. That was one of the most bizarre things that happened during the course of the week, was it not?
Oh, yeah, dude. I'm like, Herbert's on the field. What the hell's going on? Then it was like, maybe Tyrod Taylor's lined up as a wide receiver right now. And, with the sideline reporting access or lack of access because of COVID, it took longer for the broadcast team to actually sort of, figure out what was happening in that game. I'm like you. I like the Chargers in this game. There's a whole lot of reasons why. It's a solid team sort of across the board, and if they can get their running game going at all, that will just give Justin Herbert a little bit more time. But I got to tell you, I mean, I was so impressed by Herbert, just sort of getting thrown in there, the big strong arm, and then to hear his head coach come out the day after the game and basically say it's still Tyrod Taylor's team was just mind-blowing. And then 24 hours after that, there was the report that came out, and I felt terrible. I mean, like, the joke is, isn't it bad enough that, you play in the National Football League and the opposing team is trying to hurt you? Well, if you're a Los Angeles Charger, apparently your own doctors are trying to injure you before you have a chance to play. So Taylor was, shot with an injection. Apparently it punctured a lung. He was, the last report I saw on this was terrible. He's been told that he shouldn't play, period. They haven't given him a time window yet. They've said you shouldn't play for a while. So I think what we're looking at, heading into this weekend, barring any sort of and I feel bad for Tyrod Taylor. I mean, I feel bad for the kid. But the Chargers are going to win this game. It's just the Panthers are a glorified Mississippi State football team right now. That is exactly who the Panthers are. One last thing about this, though, and I'm with you, Brad. I don't know about you, but I went to a bunch of San Diego Charger games sort of throughout the years when I lived down in SoCal. And now that they're up in LA, I am sort of struggling with the LA Rams and the LA Chargers. And so maybe what we need to have happen here is we need a name change. And so I was just thinking about this. Maybe we should just be calling them the City of Angels Chargers that don't play in Anaheim.
So kind of a run on what the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim,
exactly.
Is it kind of a play on that? Okay.
Exactly, but that don't play in Anaheim. You have to throw that in. All right, so moving on with my number one pick of the week, speaking of the other team in Los Angeles, Brad, it was a perfect segue. Speaking of the other team in LA, it's the Rams heading out to Buffalo. As you know, if you've been following any of our podcasts at all, I'm a big Los Angeles Rams fan. This year, I think that they've got a lot of solid weapons on both sides of the ball. I think that the Buffalo Bills, all the Buffalo Bills have done so far is beat one of the worst teams in football, the New York Jets, and survived against a bad football team in Miami. That is who the Bills have beaten so far. So this will be the Bills' first test. When you look at who the Rams have beat so far, Well, at least you can look to that first week where they beat the Cowboys and then flew across country and took down Brad Hoiseth's favorite quarterback in the National Football League, Carson Wentz. So I think this is a game where I can see a lot of people are still sort of riding the hype of the Sports Illustrated articles, the magazines that came out that featured pictures of Buffalo Bills on the front covers, and all the websites and all the predictions of all the people that are jumping on the Buffalo Bills bandwagon because they want to go ahead and ring the horn that the New England Patriots are finally dead. That is not the case. The Patriots will probably still win this division, and Buffalo will probably make the playoffs but come in second. I have, in this particular game, the Rams winning it.
Well, again, I'm going to disagree with you, Dabbah. And I actually have some logical reasons why, unlike your reasons. Okay. Okay. First of all, the Rams, weren't they last week in Philadelphia?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And so then they have to play that game. They have to come all the way home across the country.
Yeah.
Get a couple of days of practice and all the extra time that goes into COVID. Now you got to go all the way across the country again back to Buffalo. I think it's a bad travel schedule for the Rams this week. And I'm going to say that the plane flights add up. I think the Bills, I don't think they escaped Miami. I think they pretty much controlled that game for the most part, and then Miami scored late to make it close. I still think the Bills are a really quality football team. I still think that Jared Goff is not a very good quarterback, and I think that the Bills have got one of the better young teams in the league. They're going home, and I'm going to take the Bills in that game. I say they cover that spread, and that the Bills they come out the victor. And they beat the 2.5 spread at home.
Yeah. I texted Brad a little earlier in the week. We were going back and forth about something, and I texted him that I believe in the church of Jared Goff. So I'm going to continue to be a good disciple. This is the Gods of Odds show, Brad, and I am going to and follow Jared until he proves me wrong. Look, I love Stephon Diggs. I love Josh Allen. They do have a really nice group of running backs as well. The travel across country, the Rams are not the only team in their division dealing with that this week. The 49ers were at MetLife last week, and now they got to go back to MetLife this week after complaining about how bad the field was. So it is, I don't know what's going on with the NFL schedulers, but I think they came up with these schedules prior to COVID sort of hitting. They were sort of set in stone prior to it. So I just think that your logic, as logical and as much sense as it will make to most sane people, is going to be proven wrong in this particular game. Just because I just think that the Rams have too much firepower, and their defense is going to, especially that defensive line, is going to get to Josh Allen and apply pressure that he hasn't seen all year. Remember, Josh Allen had never thrown for over 300 yards in the National Football League until the start of this year. They have not faced a real defense yet. So I will be on the Buffalo Bills bandwagon if they win this game, but I don't see it happening for those reasons and more. Mr. Hoiseth, we have gone through our top 10. Any final Brad Hoiseth words of wisdom as we head into week 3 of your National Football League season?
Is there a worse football game than the one going on tonight?
It's a battle of which shade of green do you like more?
Wow. I mean, as a general rule, over the years, I've always thought Thursday night games are not a really good product. The teams always come out, they look a little unprepared. A lot of guys are still getting over injuries from the previous Sunday. But that's a dog of a football game. So I'll watch it though. I don't know about you, Dab. I'll be tuning in for a little bit. You never know what's going to happen there.
Yeah.
And but certainly, I'm looking forward to week 3 of the NFL. I think we've got a good slate of games. I think they're hard ones to pick this week. I really thought the lines were much, much more difficult this week. I don't think that the two of us combined will go 8-2 this week. But if we get out of there above 500, I think we'll have had a good week this week.
Yeah, I would say 60% is what I'm shooting for this week. Would be the number. One last comment or two on tonight's big football game between teams that have different shades of green in their uniforms. I like Gardner Minshew, but I couldn't tell you 5 players on that Jacksonville defense. And the other side to this as well is, Tua watch. Like, if there's a perfect time for Miami to at least bring him in for a play or two in a game, this could be where it happens. So I will be tuning in for those 2 reasons alone to Thursday night's National Football League game. All right. That is Brad Hoiseth. I am Dave Dabbah. Thanks to our Brad, our very first ever fan of the week. So thank you. Lily, I believe, is if that's correct. I also want to thank the guys over at Heatr Sports App. So that would I recommend you download that and try that out. There she is. Fantastic. For the Gods of Odds, that is Brad Hoiseth. I'm Dave Dabbah, wishing you all a tremendous week of National Football League viewing.
God here, and thanks for tuning in to the Gods of Odds. For more semi-witty sports commentary, please make sure you check out mighty.rip. Okay, go ahead and kill the music now.